Saving somebody's life is the most heroic thing you can do, right? But in this video, we will see how a police officer even made this heroic deed something that the person involved in saving a shooting victim would regret his whole life. On October 9, 2020, a retired firefighter, Joseph Garces, was driving his Jeep in Santa Paula, California, when he noticed a man named Samir Salgado lying in a parking lot covered in a liquid. Upon approaching Salgado, Garces realized that the liquid was blood and that the man had been shot in the face. The man was armed with both a gun and a knife tucked into his waistband. Garces quickly seized the gun, unloaded it, and carefully placed it on the floorboard of his Jeep. Then he retrieved the knife, using it to carefully cut open the man's shirt before immediately starting to administer CPR. But little did Garces know that this act of kindness would cost him deeply. Soon after he started administering CPR, several police officers and paramedics from the Santa Paula Police Department arrived on the scene and took charge of the CPR. Instead of appreciating Mr. Garces for trying to save a life, they made things worse for him.
Don't go to the car. Don't go to that car. Stay over here. Stay over here. Stay over here. Come over here. That's your car?
That's my car. I was driving by. I saw it.
Garces told the officers that he was just passing by when he saw the victim and that he was only there to help. He also told the cops that Salgado wasn't breathing and that he didn't detect a pulse, so his training kicked in and he started performing CPR. But there wasn't much maturity in the police officers' way of handling the situation. They started investigating Garces like he was one of the shooters.
Okay.
I'm not a part of this.
We don't know anything about that. We see a gun in the car. You're not going there. Do you have your ID?
It's in the car.
What's your name?
Joe Garces.
As the first responding officers continued interviewing Garces, another officer, Detective Chris Rivera, arrived on the scene, who, without even taking into account what had happened, asked other officers to get this guy out of here. Garces, who was already tired of the cops' nonstop questioning, didn't like Rivera's attitude at all.
Get this guy out of here. Sir.
He's a witness.
What the?
Relax.
I appreciate it.
Huh?
So I got a crime scene, sir. I'm a detective.
Yeah, and I'm here helping him, so step the off. Okay? If you're a good detective, you wouldn't be yelling at me right now. You'd be taking care of your job.
Over here.
After getting a strong reply from Garces, it was clear that Detective Rivera's ego had been hurt. "Get out of my crime scene," he started yelling at Garces.
Rivera, get out of my crime scene.
What are you going to do to me?
Get out of my crime scene. I'm going to make you next time. Get out of my crime scene.
Come with me, Mr. Garces. Mr. Garces.
That's my...
Knowing that Detective Rivera was looking for a reason to arrest him, Garces complied with his lawful but rude requirement and left the crime scene. But even then, Rivera wasn't happy and continued yelling. Garces reminded him and other responding police officers that he had worked with the Santa Paula PD for 27 years while being a firefighter. But there was no change in Rivera's attitude, who continued screaming at Garces even though he had left his crime scene.
No wonder people don't give you guys the benefit of the doubt. And I worked with you for 27 years. When do I get my car back then? Hey, tell them thank you for teaching me not to be helpful, you fat piece.
Garces told the officers that their arrogance was the main reason why many citizens have begun to treat them with less respect. However, instead of taking this feedback coming from a retired firefighter as something to work with, Detective Rivera took it personally, and his patience gave up. Rivera left the crime scene and ran toward Garces.
I need you to back up.
You need to calm him.
I need you to back up. Come here.
No.
I got him. Come here.
No, you need to really the pain compliance, that's what we need to do. Because you don't like being talked.
Upon approaching Garces, Detective Rivera forcibly put his hands on Garces' shoulders and C-clamped his forearm and elbow. Now, this was a totally bad move on the detective's part. In order for an officer's use of force against a citizen to be constitutional, it must be reasonable under the Fourth Amendment. You see, the Fourth Amendment gives citizens the right to be secure in their person against unreasonable seizures. Since there was no violence from Garces' side, Detective Rivera grabbing him in that manner was completely unreasonable. In addition to that, whenever detaining or arresting a citizen, police officers shall inform the citizen that he is being detained or arrested. As we can see, without giving a single warning to him, Detective Rivera violently grabbed Garces and forced him against a tree. But the Constitution wasn't the only thing that Detective Rivera violated while arresting Garces. He also breached the policy of the Santa Paula Police Department. According to the SPPD use of force policy, officers shall use only that amount of force that reasonably appears necessary given the facts and totality of the circumstances known to or perceived by the officer.
Take it down a notch.
Somebody here's not controlling themselves.
Down.
You.
Take a deep breath.
Don't be a hypocrite.
I've taken a deep breath. It's your turn.
Yeah, don't be a
You want
hypocrite.
to talk like adults? I'll let you go. You want to talk
Did
like
you
adults?
start talking to me like an adult?
Do you understand how
Do you
my
see
job?
what you're doing wrong?
Do
Yes.
you want to go for 148 for being in a crime scene? Just because sergeants at patrol don't know how to do their job, and you were a
You're
cop
saying
at
your
one time-
sergeant doesn't know how to do his job?
Take a Turn around.
Rivera handcuffed Garces and put him under arrest. However, realizing that he would only make things worse, he gave the custody of Garces to another officer who was way more well-behaved and reasonable than him.
Just so you know, I'm retired because of PTSD. Major anxiety problems. Being in handcuffs doesn't help me. I know you guys got to do it. Keep away from me.
Got it.
He is accelerating this way more than I am.
I won't let him talk to you. You want the windows down or anything?
The officer informed Garces that he was being detained despite him being handcuffed. But even in order to detain a citizen, the officers need to have a reasonably articulated suspicion that the citizen has committed, is committing, or is about to commit a crime, which was clearly missing in the case of Garces. Sure, Garces was yelling and arguing with the detective, but that doesn't mean that he was doing anything illegal. Garces had even left the crime scene on the demand of the officer, and his actions became reasonable when you consider Detective Rivera's attitude and actions, who was continuously criticizing Garces. Even according to the First Amendment, Garces' right to speech is protected, even if it is intended to interfere with the performance of an officer's duty, which was clearly not the case, as Rivera had all the liberty to work on the case and not get involved in an argument with Garces. It seems that either Detective Rivera didn't know anything about Garces' rights, or if he did know, he didn't pay much respect to him and proceeded to violate them. The officers held Garces in the back of a police car for 15 minutes, before Detective Rivera took off the handcuffs and informed him that he was free to go. However, the damage had already been done. Garces told the officers that he wasn't feeling well and then he needed to see a doctor. Shortly after, an ambulance was called to the scene and Garces was transported to Community Memorial Hospital, where he received treatment for a dislocated shoulder and torn labrum, which was surgically repaired. While Garces was undergoing surgery, the shooting victim that he had helped earlier by performing CPR, Samir Salgado, was also getting better in the hospital. Fortunately, he survived the shooting, and his victimizer, a 42-year-old Santa Paula resident, Richard Valencia, was arrested and charged with attempted murder shortly after. The case is still pending in court to this day. After fully recovering from the injuries, Joseph Garces came forward to hold Rivera accountable for the violation of his rights. On August 19, 2021, Garces filed a federal lawsuit against Detective Rivera and the city of Santa Paula, claiming that his civil rights had been violated. The lawsuit also contained a federal claim regarding the excessive use of force. But to Garces' surprise, in the hearing of March 24, 2023, U.S. District Judge Fernando L. Anaya Rocha ruled that Rivera had qualified immunity and couldn't be held liable for the federal excessive force because Judge Fernando didn't consider a C-clamp as a violation of the Fourth Amendment. The case will now proceed against the city of Santa Paula, but not Rivera. The city's expert, former Pasadena Police Chief Philip Sanchez, testified that Rivera did nothing wrong. But there are also some people who sided with Garces. I kind of feel for this guy, the SFSU professor Jeffrey Snipes said, referring to Garces. He stops, he renders aid. Everything is cool, calm, and collected until this officer shows up. He probably saves this guy's life. Every single step he takes is appropriate. He takes the gun, takes the bullets out, removes the knife, and then Rivera gets on the scene and upends the whole thing. We saw from the moment Detective Rivera arrived on the scene, he started talking down on Garces, who was doing nothing wrong but helping the victim. Rivera yelled at Garces and asked his subordinates to get Garces out of the spot. It was clear that Rivera didn't want anybody to do what he believed was his duty. While Garces was providing a witness statement, Rivera lashed out at him without thinking for a second that this man had saved the life of a shooting victim moments ago. As if that wasn't enough, after kicking Garces out of the crime scene, Rivera followed him to the other side and then proceeded to use excessive force against him. Rivera's actions look even worse when you consider that he had received training for de-escalating the situation and not escalating it, which is exactly what he did. Rivera let his ego take over the situation and made matters worse. If the police are to have a respectful relationship with citizens, and if they want to cooperate with other professions, they have to respect other humans and their contribution to society, just like other citizens are to respect their profession. If you want to watch more of these videos, please subscribe to the channel.